I'm CJ Peterson, and welcome to The Journey is Real. We talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their heart. Today, my guest is Mike Kowis, and his passion is off-road racing. Thank you for coming on today, Mike.
Thanks for having me, CJ. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, we titled your podcast From Dust to Glory, so the connection is kind of obvious, but could you explain to our listeners how this became a passion for you?
So it all started when I was probably a teenager. This is in the mid 80s, and off-roading was a big thing. I lived in the country about an hour away from outside of Houston, and I bought a three-wheeler. That's what they had back then. It was before four-wheelers. And so I bought it with the money I earned. I saved up for a couple of years doing yard work and bought a little three-wheeler and rode around the woods. I lived out in the woods close to Trinity River, so I ride the sandbars with my friends and just really enjoyed, being outside in the nature and exploring and adventuring. Really enjoyed that as a young guy. And then when I became old enough to drive, I sold my three-wheeler and then haven't rode it for many, many years. But that's how it all began. And so now today, if I go riding in the woods, it reminds me of my youth and I just love it. It's a lot of fun.
Well, it said that you have been racing for 14 seasons?
Right. So what happened was in 2001, I bought a four-wheeler because now they're safer vehicles, so everyone has four-wheelers. So I bought one of those just to ride around the woods behind the neighborhood I lived in at the time. And at the time I had little kids, they were young, but I would, give them little rides around the yard and whatnot. And eventually when they got older, I gave them rides around the trails in the back of the neighborhood. So that was in 2001. And then in 2004, I discovered off-road racing, and the particular form is called cross-country racing. And so essentially just running through the woods. They have trails set up and you race for at least an hour, and you do as many laps as you can in 1 hour. And so I went to my very first race in 2004, and except for a few seasons that I did other things, I've pretty much been doing it ever since. And I'm addicted to it. It's a lot of fun.
So were you nervous on your first one? Not quite sure what to expect?
Wow. I tell you, I picked a doozy to begin cross-country racing because the first one I ever went to was a GNCC, which is Grand National Cross-Country Racing. It's a national...
So that sounds big.
It's big. Yeah, they're on TV. It's a nationwide racing series, and they do dirt bikes, and they do four-wheelers, and they've done side-by-sides until recently. And so my very first one was in Gilmer, Texas, which is up near sort of close to Oklahoma, but it's in East Texas. And I raced up there. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know how many people would be there. I just knew it's a big thing, and I just wanted to give it a try and see what it was like. And I found that I was starstruck because the people I've been following in off-road magazines and some of the TV programs, like Mike Penland and Scott Kilby and all these other famous folks, they were there, and I got to meet them. And there's, some of these riders have like sponsorships from Kawasaki and all the other big name brands, and they have 18-wheelers there and all this support. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people there.
And then there's little old Mike coming in.
Yeah, I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I had a friend of mine show up, and he was my mechanic, and he had a 5-gallon jug of gas and one little toolbox that I brought. And he sat there on the sidelines and watched me race in case I needed help. I never did, thank God. But yeah, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And the most scary thing is when you're sitting there on the starting line, and I look to my left and I look to my right, and there's about 15, 20 ATVs just in my class, and all the other classes they staggered the starts. So it's our turn next, and the announcer famously says in GNCC racing, he yells out 10 seconds. And that means it's 10 seconds until go time. And, your heart is pounding, your adrenaline's rushing, and you're like, oh my God, am I going to do this? Am I really going to do this? And
it's really, back now, you're kind of surrounded.
Yeah, and it's a dead engine start, which means that the engine is turned off. And when they raise the flag, you have to start it and then hit the gas and get out in front of everybody because you're all lined up equally. And you're facing for us, it was a right-hand turn about 25 yards up ahead. So we're all racing toward the same turn. It's a tight little turn, and there's no way, 20 ATVs are going to fit around this turn. So it's a mad dash, and it's craziness, and dirt's flying everywhere, and you're just hoping you don't get ran over. But somehow I made it through the first turn, and we just kept going. So it was so much excitement, though.
And that's when the bug bit you. You were done.
I was done. Yeah. And never, that same excitement happens every single time. It's amazing after all these seasons and I'm still racing. We get to the starting line. It doesn't matter if it's me and two other guys in my class, the butterflies start going in my stomach and my heart starts pumping and we're looking at a corner, 25 yards up ahead. And we're thinking, well, how are we going to fit around this corner, and you just never know how it's going to turn out. Sometimes people roll over and crash and they get them back upright and they keep going. So it's just a lot of fun, a lot of excitement.
Well, I understand that you passed this bug down to your son, Cash.
I have, yes. So when I did ATV racing,
First I got to ask, is your wife like terrified every time you guys go out?
Right. Yeah, she's a brave soul. I think she's just happy to get a little quiet time, because it gets us out of the house for the day. But yeah, she's supportive in that sense that she doesn't mind us going. And, she'll say a prayer for us at the house or whatever sometimes,
So how did you get your son how'd you pass it on to your son, and how's he doing? How does he like it? How did he start? How'd that journey look for him?
Right. So when I did the ATV racing, it's one rider per vehicle, obviously. And so I raced by myself for many years from 2004 through 2014. So about 6 years ago. And in the middle of a race, I passed two people at once, which is a little not so smart, a little too aggressive. And when I got around the second rider, I realized there's a 4-strand barbed wire fence directly in front of me. And there's no way I was going to make the turn and stop in time and miss the fence. So I was like, oh, this is the end of me. And so that was my last ATV race. And luckily I walked away from it. I could not believe my lucky stars, but essentially I rolled and me and the quad rolled. And then when we got to the fence, I still don't know how this happened. I mean, the only logical explanation is the big guy upstairs was watching out for me, because there's no other reason I'm alive today except for that. But I literally, when I rolled through the fence, I stopped about 10 feet on the other side of the barbed wire fence, and I looked up and I saw my four-wheeler leaning against the barbed wire fence, and the top 2 strands were bunched together and the bottom 2 strands were bunched together. And I apparently went through the middle of all that.
Wow.
And it happened so fast, it was just a blur in my mind, but I couldn't believe I walked away. All I had was a couple of scratches. I did break my right wrist. I was able to, function. It wasn't like sticking out of my arm or anything.
But still, that's huge.
But it was amazing. I really thought that was the last breath I was going to take when I went through that fence. But the big guy upstairs was watching out for me. So that was my last race. My wife said, in a gentle, kind way, as much as she could,
let's not push any more limits.
no more racing. She said you could keep the 4-wheeler if you want for just casual riding or yard work, but no more racing. And so that was a really a tough day when I realized, oh crap, this may be the end of my racing.
Getting older sucks.
Yeah. So a few months later, it dawned on me. Finally came up with a perfect solution, or at least I think so. And that's side-by-side racing. And it's essentially a 2-seater vehicle, like a Polaris Razor, and there's a whole bunch of other machines that do it now.
Yeah.
And so now I can bring my son, or a co-pilot, as they say. And so that began the journey of getting him involved, because when I first started racing these big side-by-sides, because they're much wider, they're heavier, they're longer.
But they have more bars around you for protection too.
They say with age comes a cage. So that's so I did get a cage and a side-by-side. But yeah, and you have seat belts, of course you have helmets and gloves and goggles, just like in a 4-wheeler, but doors. So there's a lot more safety equipment. You have a fire extinguisher. There's a whole lot of safety equipment that's required.
So wifey was like, okay, you're safe. I can go for it.
Yeah, she can handle that. Right, exactly. So I started racing the very next year, I guess it was 2015, and brought my son along, not to race, but to ride with me during the practice laps. I do a couple practice laps before we start the race, and also to take pictures. And I wanted to see how safe it was. I wasn't 100% sure I wanted him in the vehicle with me during the race. Mm-hmm. And so we did maybe a half a season where I just raced. He would show up and help me, take pictures or help me with the machine.
Like,
yeah.
With you.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, the first time he raced with me, he wasn't used to me going full speed, because during even the practice laps before that, we would kind of go half speed. And so he's used to that pace and that much excitement, and the trees are coming at you fast, and there's obstacles you got to climb over and go through. And he was used to all that at a certain pace. And then suddenly when the green flag went up or whatever, it was full on, right? And so he was screaming a little bit and, making noises over there I'd never heard. So yeah, he was
Right.
really squealing with excitement is the word I would use. And so, yeah, he quickly got used to it. But the funny thing is, because everyone else at races, they know what it's like. They know the adrenaline and how fast you push yourself when you race. When as soon as that race was over and we hit the finish line, a lot of people came and ran up to the car and they wanted to know what my son Cash thought. So what did you think? What did you think? Right? And he says, I thought I was going to die a few times. So yeah, he said it was bumpier than he was anticipating because we're going faster over the bumps and the jumps and the rocks and all that. And everything.
Obviously, he didn't step down, so he must have enjoyed it.
I guess so. Yeah, that's to his credit. He stuck with it. So he continues to be my co-pilot all the way up, until today. And now he's in college. And the cool thing is, he's going to Texas State, and the college is only about 45 minutes away from Bastrop, where a lot of my races are.
Oh,
So
cool.
the plan is, I'll bring the machine up there, and he'll meet me there, and I'll bring his fireproof suit. We have to wear a fireproof suit, and he'll just race with me just like always, and it'll be pretty convenient.
That's great
So
for bonding. I understand that you have written a book about it.
I have,
Would you like
yes.
to talk about that?
I
And
would
please
love
make sure
to.
to read a couple of the reviews that are in the book because
Oh,
I happen to know them and I know they're kind of cute.
right, sure, sure. So the book is called Texas Off-Road Racing, a father-son journey to a side-by-side championship. And it's a true story. It's about me and my son Cash racing together last year, and we won the championship in our little off-road
Oh,
racing.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great
That's
year.
awesome.
Everything came together. And all these years I've been racing, I'd never won the title. I've come in second place a few times, third place, but never won the title. And so we finally won, and that was exciting because he got to join in. He didn't go to every race, but he went to a lot of them. And so, I wrote a little race write-up, if you will, about each race. And essentially, at the end of the season, I thought, you know what? It's such a special season that we're going to relish for the rest of our life. I want to document that and have it journalized, if you will, in this book, Texas Off-Road Racing, and something we can enjoy, and hopefully other people that love racing will enjoy it as well. But to your point, you'd asked about the little testimonies. I say with air quotes because they're kind of made up, but they're kind of funny to me anyway. The first one is Texas Off-Road Racing is the best book I've ever read. And that's written by Mike's mom. So there you go. Thanks, Mom. The next one is this book reminds me of the Fast and the Furious, but without the fast. And that's from Mike's literary agent, but I don't actually have a literary agent. So anyway, and then the last one I'll share with you is, and there's more in the book, but this is my favorite. Oh my God, you took our son off-road racing.
I was going to say, is your wife in there?
I thought you guys went fishing. That's from Mike's shocked wife. So yeah,
That's
I made
awesome.
up. Yeah, thank you. I get a lot of compliments about the silly testimonies that I made up for this book, which is a
But
lot
I
of fun.
love it because it adds a sense of, lightness to it. And I really love the fact that it's you and your son. And like I said, that bonding, you guys have bonded over that. And I think that that's awesome, especially nowadays, because you don't often see parents that close to their children. Usually
Right.
when they hit the teens, they kind of start to drift a little bit away. You brought yours in a different way. You
And
gave
it's
them the
funny.
adrenaline and said, okay, let's go together. And I think
And
that's great.
and the funny thing is, I brought my daughter. My daughter is older, a little bit older than my son. She's about 3 years older. Her name is Lauren, and I had her race with me for the very first time this year in January at the first race
Oh,
of the
good.
season. And so she'd never raced with me, and I've been trying to convince her to show up to my races, just to watch if nothing else. And she goes to the same college my son, so she's only about 45 minutes away from most of my races. So for years, I've begged her, hey, you should show up. It'll be fun. You can take pictures. She loves to take pictures. Young folks do, teenagers and college age kids. They love taking pictures, especially themselves. They put it on Instagram, social media, whatever. So I finally convinced her this year in January to show up at one of my races. And I was a little sneaky about it. I didn't tell her this, but what I did was she showed up about 15 minutes before the race, and she just brought her phone. She was going to take pictures. And I told her that's cool. That's all, that's all it's about. And I actually brought my old racing suit and my old helmet. And I said to her, if you want to, you don't have to race, but there's practice laps, 2 of them right before every race. And if you would like to, you can ride in the car with me during the practice laps. We don't go full speed, during practice laps, and just, get a flavor for it, see if you like it. I mean, who knows? Maybe you'll want to stay and race, but if not, that's cool. It's totally up to you.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, okay, yeah, I think I'll do that. So luckily she got there. She literally got there like 15 minutes before the practice lap. So she threw on my old race suits, a fireproof suit. You just put it over your regular clothes and put on the helmet. And the funny thing was I brought 2 gloves, but they were both like right-handed. So they didn't really fit. She had to, turn the glove around and get her. Yeah, it was awkward, but if, it's fine. So anyway, we get to the practice lap. We're in the middle of the first practice lap, maybe a mile in, and it's about a 3-mile course through the woods. We're only about a mile in the first practice lap, and she looks over at me and says, Dad, I am not going to race with you today because I am too young to die. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I look around and there's all these opportunities to roll over, and I'm afraid we're going to roll over and go off in the creek or whatever. Yeah, so it was nuts. So anyway, I said, that's fine. I'm just tickled that you're able to join me for the practice lap. No problem. Then on the next lap, there's only 2 practice laps. On the next lap, she said, you know what? I think I will race with you if you promise not to roll over. I'm like, you trying to jinx me? Who does that? But I've been racing all these years with my son, and I never rolled over. So knock on wood, I was like, okay, we'll be okay. That's fine. And so, to her credit, she stuck it out. We raced. And during the race, because now we're going full speed, once they began the race, we're literally going over these, you drop down in these creeks and you come back up real fast. It's almost like a roller coaster. And I hear her squealing just like my son did on his first race. And it was hilarious because I hadn't heard that in a couple of years. And it was funny just to hear her screaming when we're going over these jumps and stuff,
So do you ever think you're going to get your wife into one of those, even for the practice run?
Probably not. I'm just going to be honest. Probably not. I'll be lucky if I ever see her go to a race. She came to like maybe 2 of my ATV races to watch when, this is way back in the day, and the kids were little, and she had to kind of watch them. She couldn't just enjoy herself. She's worried about the kids running onto the track. So yeah, it was not a great circumstance for those races, and it kind of turned her off. And she's not an outdoorsy person, to be honest. So kind of doubt she'll ever show up for that. But my daughter, people ask me, do you think your daughter will ever race with you again? And honestly, I hope so, but I doubt it, because I explained to her that day, and that turned out to be an awesome day because not only did we have fun, but we won the race, which is really exciting. And it was perfect racing conditions, which rarely ever happens. We had no dust because it just sprinkled a little bit the day before. It wasn't muddy. It wasn't hot. It was nice, comfortable, cool temperatures in January, like 70-ish. So it was really nice, perfect racing conditions. A lot of times my races are hot and dusty and dry.
Or mud-coated, like some of those pictures I have on the picture.
Exactly. And you can't even see. I mean, it's scary because you're racing and there's trees and there's other racers around you and you can't quite see. So you're just kind of holding your breath and praying, right? So anyway, that's part of the excitement. Or it's super muddy and literally your helmet and your goggles are getting coated with mud. And we have tear-offs, that little pieces of plastic, so they help you see until the next round of mud. But so those are the kind of racing conditions I'm used to, and that particular day was a perfect setting, and she didn't have to endure any of that. And I think it's a large reason why she enjoyed it so much. So we'll see. Maybe she'll join us one day.
But you got her out there, and that's again a memory that you guys can share. So I know that you have other books outside of the Texas Off-Road Racing book. What other ones do you have out?
I do. So I have 3 other books out right now. I happen to have them with me. One of them is called 14 Steps to Self-Publishing a Book. This is probably my best-selling book. And it's basically a self-publishing guide for aspiring authors. Excuse me, let me drink a little water here. So my other book I have a couple others. Another one's called Smart Marketing for Indie Authors, and this is a guide to help authors sell their book, promote their book, and that's even tougher than writing a book, as you know. It's a real struggle. And then my very first book is about college teaching, which is another passion of mine. I teach 1 night a week at the local community college, Lone Star College. It's a lot of fun, and so after teaching there about 15 years, I came out with my very first book. It's my debut book, and it's called Engaging College Students, a Fun and Edgy Guide for Professors. And it's just basically a college teaching tip book with college teaching tips to help instructors learn how to engage their audience.
So what do you teach?
I teach business law, and I've also taught partnership and corporate income tax class, which is what I do in my day job. I work at a utility company, and I work in the tax department as a tax attorney. And so, I enjoy teaching, doesn't matter what the subject is. But after a few semesters, I was doing both business law and then this tax class. And I said, it kind of feels like working overtime because I teach a 3-hour night class and I, work all day and then I show up to the college and I teach 3 hours of tax and I worked on tax all day and it just kind of felt like overtime. So I said, can I just teach business law? And they said, sure. And I've been doing that ever since.
Which is
So
kind of fun. So
it is, yeah. It's because it's got a little bit of everything. It's got criminal law, contracts, tort, civil actions, and the court system. We learn about business entities, intellectual property, all kinds of cool stuff like that. It's real world stuff. It's a lot of fun to teach.
okay, so for those who want to learn more about you and your books and stuff, how do they find you online?
Right. So they can go to my website, and I'll spell it out to you in a second, but it's mikekowis.com, and it's spelled www.mikekowis.com, mikekowis.com.
Awesome. And do you have any advice for any aspiring racers?
I do. Just get out there and have some fun. I mean, when I went to my very first GNCC race, I was standing in the tech inspection, that technical inspection, which is all the racers had to go through it and they make sure your safety equipment is on the vehicle and so forth. And I was standing beside Scott Kilby. He was a famous off-road racer at the time. And I just struck up a conversation with him and I told him this is my first race, have any advice for me? And he gave me excellent advice. He told me there's really two things you need to think about today. Don't worry about winning. Just go out there and have fun. That was the number one goal. Finish and have fun. Those are the two things he told me to do. And that was my goal, just to finish the race and have fun. And I did. I've been addicted ever since. The one thing Scott didn't mention, I wish he would have, well, he should have mentioned that this is such an addictive sport. That would have been good advice. I didn't know about that. So to anybody that's thinking about it, go for it. Just be prepared to, spend a lot of your spare money and time on your machine and if you love racing as much as I do, because it's very addictive.
Okay, and you have 2 books on self-publishing and indie writing. Do you have any advice for any aspiring authors?
Sure. So just like the off-road racing, just do it. I'd never been an author before my first book. I didn't know any authors. And so to me, it was like, okay, I just had this envision in my mind what I'm going to do, what it takes to be an author, how to write a book. I really had no clue. So I just started writing and I gave myself a deadline. And this would be a really good tip, I guess, is put yourself out there. I did on Facebook. I let all my friends and family know I had a deadline of 1 year. I was going to write a book. And that was really good because they kept me honest and they helped me be accountable for that goal. So when 1 year came and went, I didn't have a book. People were asking, where's your book? And, I had like 56 pages or something, including the outline. And so that prompted me. I was a little embarrassed, but it was good because it motivated me.
You got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, right? And the very next year I had like 86 pages and it took another year. And I think I was, I had a little bit of writer's block and I finally got past that. And I think I was 110 pages roughly. And finally, after 4 years, I got the whole thing done. It was like 154 pages when it was over. And I got it self-published and it was out there. So it was very thrilling and exciting, but it was worth every agonizing minute of it. So I definitely recommend go for it and let people know about it, and they'll hold you accountable if you put a goal out there publicly like I did on social media.
There you go. Well, you have a few minutes left, like 3 or so minutes. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess I would like to just add, for anybody out there that's an aspiring author or even as a current author, I recommend joining author groups like the Nonfiction Author Association. Meet some really wonderful people. It's really inspiring to me to go to these things because they have topics that usually help authors such as myself, and you're listening to other authors go through the same struggles you do. Something about authorship that makes you feel alone because the writing process is typically alone. And so there's something about meeting other people that do the same thing, have the same passion for writing that you do, and you hear them going through their struggles and you hear their successes, and it's all very inspiring to me. And And the same thing with the racing. You know, if you join a racing series and you sort of look to them as family, and you hear after the races, we love to talk, you know, our stories about what we saw in the woods and how this happened to us, how we overcame this, or something broke, and just swapping those stories. It's a bonding experience, and you know, it's a brotherhood. Everyone's out there to have a good time, but they also want to help you. If they see you in danger, they'll stop and help. So it's really, you know, join an organization, get involved, whatever your passion is, and meet other people that do that. And I think you'll find it inspiring and helpful.
Yep, and I'll echo definitely the authors because I'm on the fiction side of it. You're on the nonfiction side of it, and so just the same thing of finding a group that you can talk to with other authors. You can brainstorm, get ideas for marketing. You can, you know, get story ideas sometimes even through those. They share different tips and tricks that they've learned and picked up throughout this time. And so I do definitely encourage you to find some sort of author group in your area, and I totally agree with that. For those looking or interested in Mike Kowis's book, what was it? Texas Off-Road
Racing, Texas Off-Road Racing.
Mhm. And is that written by you and your son or just you?
It's just written by me. I have some stories in there, you know, about his perspective to the extent that I was in the car and he told me this, or I saw him nervous or whatever. But it is, I'm the author, but there's pictures, there's like 40 color pictures in there. So he's in there a lot as well. So he's very involved in the book in that sense, but I actually wrote it.
Okay. For anybody interested in looking for Mike Kowis's stuff, it is www.mikekowis.com. That's www.mikekowis.com. Thank you for coming on today, Mike, and thank you for sharing your actually both passions, writing and off-road racing. I appreciate you.
Thank you, CJ. It was fun to be here.
Thank you. And thank you guys for listening to The Journey is Real, where we talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. I'm CJ Peterson of cjpetersonwrites.com. Until next time.